Hey, welcome to today's conversation. I am so excited to be bringing on Jeff Sorensen from Breath Army, who's all about embodied leadership and really helping people step into leadership and really use their gifts to change the world. And so, Jeff and we speak the same language. We're all about leadership, we're all about radical accountability and doing the hard things and putting ourselves out there and helping other people do the same. So, I'm really looking forward to diving into this episode. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm
Yeah.
excited to dive in as well.
Yeah, me too. So, like all of my episodes with any guest, I love to always hear what your story is because, as you know, I am the story gal. I love to hear people's stories because I think that our stories reveal so much about our character and how we show up when we are met with ourselves and the external world. And I've heard your story before, and
Mm.
it's so good. So, how did you get into this work? Share your story with us.
Yeah. Well, it's a long story, of course, and there's many different facets that wove together to be here where I am now. But one story that I'll share with people to kind of give a little bit of a picture of where I come from, and we can take people back to October 23rd, 2003. And I'm looking at my body that's lying in the back of an ambulance. And my body, the nurse in the back, and the ambulance are covered in blood. And I'm drifting further and further away. And I hear a voice that says to me, you can keep drifting off, or you can go back, but there will be a lot of suffering if you do. But there is a knowing within me that I needed to go back and that there was still something that I needed to do with my life. And boom, I'm back in my body. I rip off the straps on the spine board. I sit up and I yell at the paramedics, take me back to the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
Because I knew that I wasn't going to survive the transport to the ICU that was over 2 hours away. And so, flash forward from that, I'm back living my life. But the pain and the injuries from the accident piled on top of a mountain of childhood trauma are so bad that I'm now on oxys, benzos, SSRIs, and I'm also partying and self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And at that point in my life, I just felt completely lost and hopeless. My relationships were a disaster. I was suicidal, but I'm living this bad boy gangster lifestyle. And eventually I wind up in Mexico and I meet a man that's working for the Sinaloa cartel. And I was recruited to start drug trafficking for them.
Wow.
And eventually I quit working for the cartel, but I was convinced to go back and do one last run.
Oh, just one last run. I don't even like I wonder where this is gonna go.
The one last run.
But just one more time,
And
just one more time. Yeah.
and it was a setup. And I was busted by the military in Mexico and I was thrown in jail for what threatened to be a 10 to 25-year sentence. And at that point in my life, really the only thing I cared about were my dogs.
Mm.
And my dogs were staying with a friend of mine while I was locked in that concrete cell. And I only had 1 hour a week outside where I could talk to people on the outside and make phone calls. And so I'll never forget the day that I phoned my friend Bibi, who was taking care of my dogs. And she was taking care of my dog, Carmen. And she picked up the phone and she said, Jeffrey, I'm so sorry. Carmen was killed by another dog's owner after they got in a fight. And the guilt that I felt from leaving her behind and losing the most important thing to me in my life felt devastating. And so we're called back into line. We're ushered back up into the cell, and I'm thrown back into the cell, an 11-foot by 11-foot cell with 30 other men. and I'm sweating in the corner. I'm sitting there meditating, and I meditate for days because I don't want to eat. I don't want to look at anybody. And I'm just trying to process all of this pain and the grief and the suffering that I'm going through. And all of a sudden, I realize I'm free. I don't have to suffer anymore. And so, 2 years after getting locked in that cell, I was released early by what we could call good luck. El
Wow.
favor de Dios, as they say in Spanish.
Mm.
And after getting back to Canada, I was able to start pursuing my dreams again. And I traveled the world and I studied with some of the best known names in breath and movement and cold exposure and plant medicine and trauma healing. And I was able to take a completely different path with my life. And the pain and the suffering that I'd been carrying with me since childhood was no longer running my life. And I was able to experience that true freedom from within. And so now I get to help other people find that same freedom.
I love this so much. I love your story because it's so intense, right? It's like you're in the back of, an emergency vehicle, you're floating out of your body, and, the message is, hey, shit's gonna get real if you go back. It's gonna be really painful. So you had the option to leave or come back. And I guess your soul was like, I must come back and feel all this pain, come back into your body. And I think in your story from the previous time we spoke, it's your face was like partly ripped off too. So you had like
Oh,
half of your face was ripped off.
it was ripped off.
Wow.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like physical trauma. You went through emotional trauma and you were addicted to drugs. Like, you were in a really dark place. And the reason why I love to open up with story here and for you to share your story is because no matter where you're at right now, whether you have a drug addiction or some other addiction, or you're going through physical pain, emotional pain, or you're in something where you feel like you're in the dark, you always have the opportunity to turn your life around. And that's what your story really shows me and our listeners about where you were then. You were working for the freaking cartel. And like, how many people, I'm just curious, like, I'm curious, how many people are like, oh, I'm just gonna have like one more drink. I'm just gonna go to one more thing. I'm just gonna do one more of the thing I know I shouldn't do because I think that one more time is going to be the last time. And, it's almost a gift that you were thrown into jail because you had your wake up call. Do you think you would have just done one more time, one more round if you weren't caught? Like, what are your thoughts on that? I'm so curious.
Yeah, it was an interesting moment because at that same time, I had been running a restaurant in Mazatlan and I'd really worked super, super hard to get that restaurant going. And the money that I was making from the cartel had really helped me get my feet back on the ground. And I had quit working for them, and I had been teaching yoga for years at that point, and kind of living this double life. And
Mhm.
the restaurant had finally gotten off the ground, and I'd had an investor come in and offer to invest in the restaurant and franchise, and so it felt like just like one of those pivotal moments where we have this opportunity to choose a different path. And I think that sometimes there's still something else that we need to learn. And despite knowing that that other path is available and it's
Mhm.
right there, our soul knows that there's something else needed for our growth.
Mhm.
And we just need to go through that process. And sometimes it can be really hard. And yet, I think we really need to find compassion for
Mhm.
ourselves within that
Mhm.
and not beat ourselves up and not get caught in that mire of despair
Mhm.
and judging ourselves and thinking I should have done it differently. When I landed in that prison cell, I knew that I was exactly where I needed to be.
Mhm.
And that guided me through the whole time there. It wasn't, it wasn't a question, should I have taken the other path? Should I have chosen differently? I knew that I was where I needed to be. And so I was open to learning what I needed to learn. And I also wasn't going to stay there. And so I was able to use all the tools that I had learned to find my way out.
Hmm. Yeah, I love this. It's so funny because you were just talking about how that could have been a pivotal moment with the investor, right? There was a potential
Mhm.
investor, but you decided not to go forward with the investor because of the deal or because you went to jail. Like, tell us a little bit more about that because you didn't share that in your story.
Hmm. It was interesting because I was really torn as whether to go or not. And first, I told my friend that worked for the cartel, I'm not going.
Hmm.
And then I went back, talked to the investor, said, I'll be back in a week.
Hmm.
I need to go and do this thing.
Hmm.
And it was this back and forth, and I went back and forth a couple of times, and there was a knowing, I think, within me that this was going to be really hard.
Hmm.
And yet there was still a sense that, no, I think go do this. There's probably greed playing in there
Hmm.
and creating a sense of safety, right? Like it's like there was a safety in that thing that I knew. And even though there was an investor coming in, that was like a a new reality for me.
Hmm.
And I defaulted to the one that I knew.
Yeah. It's so powerful because we tend to go towards our familiar hell potentially
Hmm.
versus the new opportunity. And it's interesting because you were talking about how different moments can change your life. And really, life is by design. It's always by design. A lot of the time, it's our subconscious running the show, and it's like, oh, we're just going to do this one more time. As you were talking about that, a moment in my life came up because it came up the other day for me. And it was, I was on my way to San Diego to move there, and literally everything was not working towards moving there. This is a few years ago, and it was for this guy that I was kind of dating, kind of not. We can call it a situationship. And like everything before I left Costa Rica to move there was like, this isn't working. But a part of me, I don't know if it was like, we could say divine guidance, but I think it was just my stubborn willpower. I'm an Aries, so I like to get shit done. If I have a plan, I like to execute. I went down there and literally nothing worked, business wise, nothing worked. It was just a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I ended up calling it off with this guy that wasn't really on, wasn't really not on. I don't know. But then I wrote a really good song about it. And I had this really intense experience around boundaries and all this stuff. And the reason I'm sharing this is because on my way to San Diego, I stopped in a place called Ashland, Oregon. And I had so many signs that was like, this is where you should be. This is where you should stay. Like, literally, no joke. I walked into the town, and my spiritual mentor at the time was like, ask for a sign. I think you should stay there. And I was like, "Pfft, I'm good. Like, I know where I'm going. Right. And literally, books were flying off of shelves, like falling off of shelves with no one around on books I needed to read. I got all of the signs. And I remember leaving Ashland and thinking to myself, and I said it to someone I met there, I'm like, have you ever had all of the signs to do something and you've chosen to do the opposite? And that was a moment for me. And I was reflecting on it the other day. It wasn't like this huge significant moment. I didn't end up in jail. It's not a story specific to yours. But I thought to myself, I wonder what type of magic could have happened if I stayed in Ashland and didn't go to San Diego. But there's gifts with every single choice. Anyways, now you have this gift of like, hey, listen, like I am a badass. I literally, got caught by the military. That's some real shit, man. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, and in the end, I received the greatest gift of freedom, of true
Hmm.
freedom
Yeah.
through that process of having my freedom taken away.
Yeah.
And so even if I had taken the other path, there still would have been the pieces within me, the beliefs and the patterns that still needed to be resolved somewhere along the way. And I
Hmm.
wasn't free before I left.
Yeah.
and we can only ever act from our level of consciousness. And so we make these decisions, whether they're from the subconscious or consciously, and we just got to ride them out and
Yeah.
see them for what they are, which is an opportunity. And I think
Hmm.
if we can flip it around as you did with yours as well, and it's like, okay, what can I learn from this experience? What am I here to learn?
Hmm.
And how can I choose differently in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely I relate to. I have been in my past someone who's needed to learn a lesson the hard way in order to really make a big shift.
Mhm.
And most people need to hit a hard place in order to shift, but we don't have to. It doesn't have to be hard. But I know it requires a certain level of courage, of showing up, of doing the deeper work. And I know that for you, with the work that you do, Jeff, is you have a bit of a process that you like to take people through. So, what are some of those steps when stepping into self-leadership? And I just want to break down for a moment, like how I see self-leadership, and then I'd love to hear what some of the main steps that you took and that you help people step into in order to lead. So, for me, in my process that I talk about in my book and the work that I do is honesty, courage, and showing up, which event like really is about taking radical responsibility and not even responsibility, that's more of the courage part, but then ripping off the band-aid and taking action. Because I find a lot of the time people will be like, okay, I mean, honest with myself with whatever's going on. Maybe it's an addiction, maybe they're around the wrong people, it's a behavior, it's something. It's like, okay, I'm honest. Maybe I'm talking about it to a therapist or to myself, but I'm not courageous enough to maybe clean some stuff up or look at myself in the mirror. Or, you know what, maybe I'm doing a little bit of that, but I'm not ripping off the band-aid. I'm avoiding taking action. So when I think of leadership personally and in my process, I'm all about honesty, courage, showing up, which is massive action. I love to hear a little bit about what your process is when you're working with people and break some of these steps down because I would just really love to hear your reflection on this because there's a level of
Yeah,
self-leadership that needs to be there for you to go from being in jail, working for the cartel to, hey, I'm like the breath army guy helping people heal and transform and step into leadership. Like that's a huge transformation. So share some of those steps with us.
yeah, I feel like we have very similar styles. We might have different names for the steps, but it's very similar. I start with radical ownership.
Mm,
And so that's kind of the honesty piece is about getting really honest about what's happening in our life, but also taking ownership for it. And
that's
so
hard.
taking ownership for the relationships we're in, the job we're in,
Hmm.
the place that we're at in our lives, and really recognizing that despite the fact that we may not want to, we need to take ownership for that because we're co-creating our lives.
Hmm.
And so taking responsibility for everything for me allows people to reclaim their power. Because if we're continually in the victim blame trap, then we never really have any power to change our lives and everything's happening to us. And so we need to switch that around and recognize that, as we were speaking to earlier, everything's happening for me.
Hmm.
And so, how can I take ownership for this? How can I take ownership for the fact that I landed back in prison? That
Hmm.
this is my own creation. It's not because the cartel set me up. It's not because the military and the DEA had this deal with the cartel. It's because I made the decision that landed me in jail.
Hmm.
But by taking that responsibility, then I reclaim my power to be able to figure my way out of that situation and also, again, to choose differently in the future. And
Hmm.
so I think that that piece of radical ownership is super important. And then I
Can we just
use,
break that down a little bit? Oh, are you going to the next step or can we break that down a little bit?
yeah, let's break it down.
Okay. I love breaking things down. So as far as radical ownership, and I love that you talked about the blame and victim cycle that so many of us get in. And I understand, we've all been in a victim mentality at some point, and I do believe in being a true victim. Sometimes we are a true victim to something that's going on. And if it's a pattern or a big life event, we have the power to change it. So when we talk about how did you know that you were in a victim or blame mentality? And how did you shift out of it into radical responsibility? Because I feel, or radical ownership, because I feel like a lot of people can get stuck in the blame and victim cycle and they don't even know that they're in it. So first of all, for anyone who's listening who's like, maybe there's a relationship dynamic going on, something with your finances, your business, you're working for the cartel. How do you know, like, how can some people start to identify if they're actually in it? Because oftentimes when we're in it, we can't really see beyond what we're in. So how did you break out of that? And what are some things that people can do?
Well, I think for a lot of my life, I was stuck in that
Mhm.
place of blame and victim, and I wanted to blame my upbringing, the circumstances that I grew up in, and I think for me that shift really happened before I left to go to Mexico. I was living in Revelstoke, which is where I live now again, and I I was deep in my drug addiction. And so I'm in one of my houses that I own. I'm talking on the phone to my best friend Harley. I'm peeking out through the blinds. I'm having a panic attack and I want to leave the country. And so I'm talking to my best friend and he says, "I'm coming to get you. I'll be there in 2 hours. Just stay where you are and I'll be there." And yet there was this sense within me that I needed to get as far away from my entire life as I could. And so Harley's a drug dealer, and his whole house is full of cocaine. And he wants me to go with him to his house to get clean, right?
Nice.
And and
That's
so
gonna
I
go
say,
well.
yeah. So I say to him, no, like, don't come.
Hmm.
And I'm not going with you. I need to get out of here for good. I'm leaving.
Hmm.
And and so flash forward 18 months later, I'm living in an RV park in Mazatlan, and I just happened to pull in to the RV park next to a trailer that's owned by the cartel. And I'm peeking out through the blinds and I'm looking around. I'm still hooked on cocaine and I'm looking for either the cops or the cartel that I'm sure are running around and they want to either bust me or kill me or steal my money or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm walking by the mirror and I look at myself in the mirror and I look terrible. Like my eyes are sunken, I'm skinny, I'm an addict. And Harley's words that he said to me before I left, if you go far, far away and everything stays the same, you'll know it was you. And so I'm looking in the mirror and I just have this moment of realization. It's like you can't keep running. It's you are creating it.
Mm.
And so I've always been really studious and loved to learn and loved to study. And so at that point, that's when I got into yoga and I just started to study and learn about the mind, learn about reality, and learn about the ways that we co-create our reality. And started to look at all of these stories that I had been telling myself about how hard my life had been and how, I felt so justified in my blame. And a lot of things had happened, a lot of hard things had happened. And it's not to deny that they happened. And also, it's to recognize that I'm here in this moment, I'm still alive, and I want to reclaim my power. I
Mm.
want to create a new life and to recognize that everybody else is also only acting from their level of consciousness. And so all the people that have harmed us along the way, they're acting from their lived experience, their level of consciousness, and that's all that they can do. And so we attract these different people in our lives. We attract these different situations, whether it's in the physical, whether it's on a soul level. And from my perspective, they're all for us to learn.
Hmm.
And so if people that are listening are finding that they're in that process of always blaming the outside, it's the weather, it's the astrology. I wish my dad would have raised me differently. My grade 3 teacher told me that I shouldn't sing or I shouldn't write or whatever it is,
Hmm.
that we need to own that. We need to own the effect that that had on us and the belief that we took on in that moment, and recognize that that belief in that moment felt real, but this might be 30 years later, and we're still carrying this belief with me that I'm not a singer, I'm not a writer, whatever it is.
Hmm.
I'm not a business person. And we need to recognize that we're still the one carrying that belief. That situation is long past.
Hmm.
And we have the opportunity to look inside and to reshape that. But along with that comes the emotion and comes all of this sensation that felt like it was too much to feel in that moment. And so that's why people don't want to take radical ownership, is because we're scared to feel. We're scared to admit that we're the ones that have been carrying with us this whole time
Hmm.
and creating our lives upon that faulty belief.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting too because we have this belief from childhood or from a moment in time, and we're just playing it out as characters in a play. We're like, oh, I'm the not worthy one. I'm the not smart one. I'm the not this, or I can't have that. And we continue to live it out. And it's really interesting because when I was writing my book, every chapter is a chapter, not the book that's out now, but my next book. And I remember every chapter was a new version of me. And during my book writing, that's when I had this like profound realization, or we could just say I felt like it embodied more into my body, was every moment we have the opportunity to close an old chapter on a part of ourselves or a part of our life and open a new door. But sometimes the unfamiliar, as you mentioned earlier in your story, is there's fear around that. Oh, who am I going to have to let go of? Who am I going to disappoint? Like, and this is true. I've noticed in so many parts of my life, and I'd love to hear this with you as well. Every few years, I'm growing and expanding and questioning my life, my direction, everything. And that's a big part of constantly being on this evolutionary journey of expanding is I outgrow people pretty quickly, and not from a place of I'm better than, but from a place of, oh, this is where I'm going. And I love surrounding myself with people who are like-minded versus putting on a pair of pants that don't fit anymore and trying to make it work. Like, and that's been a part of my life. So, do I have friends from childhood? I actually don't. I moved away. I've lived all over the place. And I know people who have had the same friends since like grade 2. And I think that that's lovely. One of the things I found is I've outgrown a lot of people in my life, not because I'm better than, just because I'm constantly evolving. So I know that that's a big fear for people. So I'd love to hear from you on that. And then I do have a question about something that you mentioned earlier that I want to circle back to before we go to the second part.
Hmm. Well, I think, what's important to understand about that for people is that our belief systems are shaping our reality. And so if we have a particular belief about ourselves, our entire reality reflects that,
Yeah.
including all of the people, all of the situations. And so if we change that belief, then everything is going to change. And it might not mean that we never see these people again. They just take a different role in our lives, and they might not be at the forefront. We just kind of, we change the way that we relate to those
Mhm.
people because we're really wanting to embody a new belief.
Mm-hmm.
And when we truly embody that, then absolutely all of the people, the situations that we attract, the circumstances that we place ourselves in are completely different. And again, it kind of circles back to what we were talking about before about choosing that familiar hell over that new vision for our lives. And sometimes we really want to hold on to these people, situations, whatever it might be, because they feel safe, and better the devil that you know than the devil that you don't. And
Mm-hmm.
so we really, that's where that piece of courage that you were speaking to earlier is so important, is to just be courageous enough to know that we can let go of these things and life can actually become better than we ever imagined. But we need to be able and willing to let go of the known.
Mm-hmm. And that space of in between where we are and where we want to go, it's uncomfortable. It's like, where do I belong? Who are my people? So going back to something you shared earlier, you were talking about your friend. Mention your friend's name again, Harley.
Harley.
So
Yeah.
Harley said, if you go far, far away and everything stays the same, you're gonna know it's you. And I think this is so interesting because I think this is a really good way to identify. Thank you, Harley, for really identifying if we're stuck in a pattern and it's us and it's not the external world. So it's like, oh, it was that toxic partner. Oh, it was that job. Oh, it was XYZ, the weather, astrology. Mercury was stuck in retrograde. Well, not all year round, buddy. You know what I mean? So when we look at that and we take that into consideration, I'd love to just bring this back to whoever's listening or watching right now is where are you potentially running away or going from maybe one relationship to the next or one job to the next or one thing to the next, and you continue to get the same result? This is an illumination that there is some internal work to do. And the crazy thing about the internal work is that when you shift, everything in your external reality shifts around you. And it's so interesting because it happens so quickly. But I don't want to say the word addiction. We are used to replaying an old story. So that old story could be relationships never work out for me, or money is hard to make, or business is hard, or it's not safe to speak my truth. And all of those stories came from a moment in time in childhood, a lot of the time before the age of 7, where we had an experience that showed us it's not safe to be myself, or I can't have X, Y, or Z. And then we're playing it out and being conscious of that. And then wondering, how can I take a different step? How can I find a coach, a guide, a community, a support system to get myself out of the pond that I'm in to get into the new pond? And I say that specifically because I know for me, years ago when I lost a chunk of hair, I've shared this on the podcast before, so I won't get into it, but my big breaking moment, my soul told me I was going to die of cancer if I didn't change my life. I had to leave a relationship. I had to do a lot of inner healing work, all of that. I had to find people that were living the type of life that I wanted so that I could justify internally to myself that that's a possible reality. Shortly after inserting myself into the right communities, the right events, the right mentorship, my whole life changed and everything became easier. So I love just to pass it back to you, Jeff, on that piece around your friend Harley and that story and environment, and how important it is, and if you have anything to share on that.
Yeah, well, I think for me, there was that deep knowing that I did run far, far away, and everything stayed the same, and yet I still needed that blank canvas because I was so locked in a mold of who I thought I was, who I thought I needed to be, and I was so deeply entrenched in that I did need that fresh canvas in order to be able to see that, I am creating this. And so I think that that was important for me, but maybe not everybody is in such an intense circumstance as I was in before I left, with the addiction and the accidents and all of the pieces that were playing out in my life. And so I think, as you spoke to, I think placing ourselves in communities with mentors that are really doing the things that we want to do, and just, really we're mimicking behavior, and we're practicing new ways of being. I've been running a year-long training for the last 3 years, which is a leadership training and breathwork and cold facilitator training. And one of the greatest gifts of that for people is that it's a small container. There's 12 people in that container, and it's a hybrid of in-person and online work. And so people get to come into this container and they meet 11 new people, and we're constantly checking in. We're constantly keeping people accountable to showing up in that way that we say that we want to show up in our lives.
Hmm.
Because if we're just off on our own and trying to do it on our own, that subconscious and the unconscious patterns can be so deep. And it's kind of like not being able to see the forest for the trees sometimes. We can't sometimes see how we're showing up in the
Hmm.
same ways. But when there's other people to reflect back to us, it's like, well, you're saying that you want to show up like this in your life, and you're not showing up like that. So what's up?
Yeah.
And so I think those communities are really important. And, and having mentors, taking courses that are aligning us with the steps that we need to take, and kind of just placing that next step in front of us so that we can get on that new path
Hmm.
and start to build some momentum in that new direction. Because I think that's one of the more challenging things, is that we can make one decision to change our life and go in a different direction. But that one decision only takes us so far. And that's where you were speaking to earlier. It's that action piece. We need to keep taking action in that direction until that really becomes embodied
Hmm.
as that new self. And it
Hmm.
takes time.
Yeah, it's interesting, these in-depth programs where you are around people who are on the same trajectory as you, I think is so valuable. I've been a part of a lot of different masterminds, bunch of different groups, and this year I joined a high-level mastermind. It's an elite mastermind that was very pricey, but I knew these mentors are the top people in the world at what they do in my field, and I want to learn from them. And I remember jumping on the first Zoom with them. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, I'm such a small fish. And I had like all this like anxiety and I was nervous talking. And,
Mhm.
like I love to help people speak and, share their story. And I'm typically a very confident person when I'm out there. But this was a new level of leadership, a new level of business, a new level of commitment to my purpose, and also like allowing someone else to lead me. But my stuff, my internal stuff came to the surface personally so that I could shift out of that smaller version of me and step into a bigger version of me. And I think this is something that we're all always doing every time we're leveling up. And it's the essentially the fast track to get to where we want to go. And we all are giving an energetic, we all have an energetic field that's constantly giving energy and information out. And the people you surround yourself with impact who you're becoming. So why not fast track where you're going by getting into the right rooms, getting the right mentorship, and getting the right support so that instead of trying to do it all on your own, doing it all on your own isn't as fun. It's harder. And we're, significantly more likely not to show up and we're, to fail or go back to our old ways of being. But when we insert ourselves in the right environments, everything changes. But it's uncomfortable, right?
Absolutely, it's uncomfortable, and I think that that's a huge part of it is recognizing that it will be uncomfortable and getting really good at being uncomfortable and changing our story around that and what that means. Because I think for many people, uncomfortable means, okay, go the other way. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we seek pleasure, we avoid pain. And so learning to go into the pain, into the discomfort, and recognizing that what we want is on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And it's interesting. The first thing that came to mind as you're talking about discomfort is actually a good sign. It means that there's work to be done. I think that what I'm seeing a lot of in like the spiritual space, with a lot of people that are, preaching spirituality in the world, mainly in the online space, new age space, is go where your bliss is, go where it feels good. And I think that can be really misleading because if we can consistently go to what feels good, that might be eating a bunch of chips and watching a bunch of Netflix and not really getting outside of our comfort zone and continuing to build a muscle of not really fulfilling on our deeper purpose, who we're really meant to be. And it can cause us to actually play small and shrink. Whereas if we go towards our discomfort eventually becomes our comfort level, and then we can continue to expand. And that's where we expand our capacity. And then, as you were sharing too, I had a flashback to years ago when you were the breathwork facilitator and Ice Man facilitator. I have you as Ice Man in my phone. Jeff Iceman Kelowna is what I have you in my phone from when I had you come in and support us at one of my mastermind retreats. And we had to go into ice. We did some breathing first, and there's a video of me going into an ice tub, and I was like screaming, and it was very uncomfortable. And ice, cold plunging, I really love. It's really great for the body and so many different things, but it was really uncomfortable. And, our first response when something is uncomfortable is, I need to get out of here. I need to run. And I think that's where a lot of people sabotage their success. They sabotage their happiness, their long-term fulfillment, their purpose. Maybe they want to invest in a program, but they're like, it's uncomfortable investing this amount. They want to be in a relationship with, have a healthy relationship with that person, potentially treating them well feels uncomfortable. So they want to run. And or ice baths, right? Like all of this is about strengthening what I'm hearing from you, our ability to be uncomfortable to get to where we want to go.
Absolutely. And I feel like the ice bath is a great metaphor for it. And I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunity with a tool like the ice bath because people get kind of lost in the physical benefits and using it as a physical practice only. When for me it's actually a really powerful tool to retrain mental patterns and to be able to build capacity to be with big emotions and big sensations and to be able to work through fears. And I think there's a lot of places where the New Age spiritual movement is misleading.
Mhm.
And I think the one that you spoke to is really important. And I think, there's another aspect where it's kind of like, oh, it's, like follow your bliss. It's all love and light. And whether we call it love and light and the polarity of that darkness, or whether we want to just call it there's an evolutionary force and a de-evolutionary force in that work in the universe. And that de-evolutionary force does not lead us where we want to go.
Mm,
And it's really encouraging us to stay identified with who we think we are. And this kind of fast forwarding into the becoming the conscious creator part, but it's from my perspective, we are conscious creators in our lives and we are co-creating our life. And so it's so important to recognize that there is a side of us that does not want our greatest evolution. It's the side that wants to stay safe. It wants to stay identified. And so if we want to grow and we want to change our life, we have to take that other path. And in doing that, then we can embody more energy, more of a capacity to create consciously in our life.
Hmm. So powerful. So we talked about, I think you said radical ownership was step one to self-leadership. We went really deep in a lot of different directions, but there was so much there that I'm like, let's just go deep. And then the second one is being a conscious creator, knowing that we are consciously creating
Uh,
our reality. And then what was the
second,
third one?
second one is self-mastery.
Okay.
And so for me, the radical ownership is taking kind of like a high level view of our lives and all of the relationships, the situations we're in, taking a look at the external world.
Hmm.
And for me, self-mastery is all about really going inside and really learning to cultivate a habit of creating space and responding differently to life. And so this is all the nervous system work and the breath work and these pieces that allow us to be able to become the witness, to be able to observe the thoughts that are rising, be
Hmm.
able to observe the sensations that are rising, to be able to develop that relationship with the nervous system, with our breath, and to recognize how those are fluctuating and what that's showing us, because our body is always showing us and signaling us. And so it's learning to create that safety within ourselves, to create space, to be able to respond differently, to be able
Hmm.
to step away from that reactionary nature that's been driving our lives unconsciously for many people for most of their life. And so it's about learning those tools and really recognizing that there's a power within us that we need to exercise and we need to cultivate that will allow us to be able to be in that place of response, to be able to just take enough space to just not do that thing that we've always done
Hmm.
and just having enough movement in there where it's like, okay, actually, I'm feeling something really big right now. This is a big fear for me. I'm
Hmm.
scared to speak in front of other people, or I'm scared to take my business to that next level. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You know,
Hmm.
there's a part of us that carries that fear, and it's not about kind of drowning that and try and push it down. It's about welcoming it. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, can I meet that part of myself with love? Can I hold that fear? You know, and can I shift that energy and create that safety within myself to be able to move forward on that different path and choose differently in my life. So for me, the self mastery is all of the inner work that really helps us to take that next step and to really become that conscious creator.
Hmm. And so with the inner work, what I love about this and also the cold plunging and the breath work and all of these tools is that it brings you back to yourself. It brings you back to your true
Mm-hmm.
identity. I was just in conversation with a friend of mine who was talking about they just hired this coach. I mean, they were working with this coach for a long time, but they were constantly using that coach for to tell them what to do. And I think that that's where we can also, in the space of personal development or our spiritual development, all the things, we can sometimes give our power away to a coach or a mentor or someone to tell us the next best thing to do with our lives. And what I love about the coaching containers that you facilitate and then I facilitate, it's really about uncovering the truth within and then running with that. And the more we can reprogram our nervous system, work on self-mastery and all of that, the more the path appears for the next
Mm-hmm.
step to take. And I think that's really important because most of us are reacting to life versus responding to it. And I think of this kitten. There were two kittens when I lived in Bali. I mean, I've lived in Bali a couple times, but there were two kittens that I found. and they looked like like were abandoned, didn't have homes, probably not food. So I went and got some cat food and I got some water for them. And I love cats. I have two cats at home. I even have a cat mug here that my friend's mom got for me as a gift. And I was like, this is the best gift ever. Um, so I'm like going to feed these like baby kittens, and one of them is coming towards me and having the water and the food. And the other one gets close and then hisses at me and then looks like she's going to bite me. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm
Mhm.
not a threat. I'm trying to give you like food and water, you know? And I remember leaving the food and water there for them later on. But I remember just thinking something bad must have happened to that second kitten because it's seen me as a threat versus me giving it a gift. And often in life, when we haven't done this internal work of self-mastery, healing the trauma, reprogramming our nervous system, having these tools, being okay with being uncomfortable, we can spot people and life, external things as a threat that are potentially actually a gift, and we can push so much away. So I love those three pieces around stepping into leadership, reclaiming our life. I love your story, Jeff, and really what I love about storytelling here too is we learn so much about you. And I know so many of the listeners and people watching right now are like, oh my gosh, like this guy can potentially help me. Like I'm in some stuff right now. I need some support. So as we start to wrap up our episode here, I mean, I'm pretty sure we could go for another hour easily, easy, but for the purpose of time. I know you have a freebie here for us, for the listeners. Tell us a little bit about the gift that you have today.
Mhm. I have a free online mini course, which is called The Foundations of Breath. And it goes into a lot of the really fundamental pieces around breath work. But I feel like people don't really understand the power and the potential within breath.
Hmm.
And so it might not be there's some of these big breathing practices that we do to work with trauma and to embody these altered states of consciousness. But there's a lot of really great information in there about just how to use the breath as a real-time tool to be able to embody that self-mastery and to understand the nervous system. So there's some really, really great tools in there, some really great information. So I encourage people to check that out on the website. And there's also a contact us form there. So if people are interested in working one-on-one, I'm taking a year off from the 1 year container that I've been leading. And so I've got some space for some one-on-one clients in 3 and 6 month containers as well. So, and even if people just have questions, want to chat, I'm always open to connecting with people and making new friends.
Awesome. So cool. And Jeff is so fun. Jeff is a super outgoing, super fun guy doing really incredible work. So make sure if you're listening to this, definitely get a hold of the free gift. I'm going to get a hold of it and I want to experience it. Really cool. And then, yeah, if you're like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor, I'm looking for a guy, definitely reach out to Jeff. Jeff has done some incredible work and continues to do that. I love your story, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here. Before we wrap up, though, today, if you were to leave our listeners with one message or a summary of what you had to say today, what would that message or summary be?
I think for me, it always comes back to it doesn't matter where you are in your life. It doesn't matter what's happening in your life or how hard it is in the moment. Just know that it can change and turn around completely. And it might be hard at first, and there might be a lot of deep stuff to deal with, but on the other side of that, life is better than people can even imagine. And so just to keep going.
So good.
Mm. And find those people that can support you on your path. That's an important part for sure.
Find your people, and life is going to get better. Just get the right
Yeah.
support, do the work. Oh my gosh, I love this. Thank you so much for being here, Jeff. It's been so fun.
Oh, thanks so much, Deidre. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you to the people listening. And yeah, super grateful for the work that you're doing in the world as well.
Thank you. And for anyone listening, all of Jeff's info is below: Instagram, website, freebies, all of that. So make sure to get in touch.